This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 395 of the DCAU Review. I'm Liam. With me, as he always is Cal. Cal, it's a new month, the month of April, at least at the time of recording here. And we are back in the future.
The future, Liam?
That's right. All the way to the year that's 50 years from now, whenever now is, or something like that. But as long-time listeners, or really not that long time, or late last year listeners would know, we recently finished up all of our Batman Beyond reviews. We've done every single episode of the series at least once. And so it's time to dip back into the re-review idea and look back at some episodes that we covered very early on the show before we, as we like to say in a self-deprecating way, before we really knew what we were doing on our podcast. And I guess if we're going to go back and look at that, what better way to go than with the very first episode or episodes we talked about of this groundbreaking series, that being the pilot episodes of Batman Beyond.
That's right, Liam. And just like every millennial that finishes up one of their favorite television shows, what do you do next? You go back to the beginning and you start all over again. You know, that's what our generation does with with our comfort shows, and this is what we're doing this week. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at just part one. We have enough to talk about today that's going to fill up a full episode, despite our 47-minute runtime of episode 26 of the podcast, where we first originally reviewed this episode. What we're going to do now is take it a slow and deliberate pace of breaking down our plot synopsis and, of course, looking back at our scores that we already gave for this episode. But we're just looking at part one this week. So we will, as we always do with our re-reviews, sort of critique our own scores and decide if we were scoring today, if we would agree with ourselves or not. And but not officially change scores at this point. They are locked up in the vault. Those are ironclad scores from our original run here. So scores are not subject to change. So excited though to look at this one with you today as we look at Rebirth Part 1 for this week's episode, which originally aired back on the WB primetime on January the 10th, 1999.
That's right, and we were definitely watching at the time, and we'll get into some of our own personal memories of the debut of this series, as well as some of the pre-production work that went into it in just a moment. But of course, first, Cal, I will give our listeners the official IMDb synopsis for this first episode, Rebirth Part 1. Our deep dive here. This episode was written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, directed by Kurt Gaeta, with music by Lolita Ritmanis, and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And before we get to that synopsis, of course, Cal, we must remind the folks that this episode and every episode that we do here is brought to you by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, the best way to support the podcast.
That's right. Buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. The best way to support our little show here. Hey, is there an echo in here? Sorry. I just repeated everything you just said, but facts are facts. It is the best way to support the podcast. We invite you to head over today and check out the various different ways to do so. You can become a one-time supporter of the podcast and send us an encouraging note with your contribution to the old coffee fund, or you can become a monthly supporter of the podcast. And of course, at the monthly supporter podcast, we have 3 different tiers that you can join us at. And each of them come with some really great perks, some really neat things for you to do. And of course, the one that we advertise and of course promote the most here is our Super Friend tier. That's our highest tier, which gets you all the perks plus one additional bonus perk. And that is the ability to ask a question, hear your answer answered on the air about the episode that we're reviewing that week if we pick your question. So whether you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast or you would like to become a monthly supporter of the podcast, please, we invite you to head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and please support the podcast today.
Absolutely. So this synopsis for Rebirth Part 1 reads as such. 50 years into the future, a young Terry McGinnis meets the aged and reclusive Bruce Wayne, even as the boy's father discovers a foul secret of his corrupt employer that leads to his death.
Ooh, a foul secret from his corrupt employer. Oh, wow.
That's
It's pretty
right. We
good.
broke out the thesaurus on that one. Very good. I'll ding it a little bit because we don't technically know that his employer had Terry's father killed until part 2. So you're getting a little bit ahead of your reading assignments there, IMDb synopsis, but we'll still give you like an A minus for that for a good effort. So but we will get into our recapping of the plot in just a moment here. But as said, I think it's fun to talk about now because obviously we're now 30 or almost 30 years, a few years off from the 30th anniversary of this show debuting. And Batman Beyond doesn't seem, maybe if you're a younger person who's grown up with it and maybe doesn't remember a time before Batman Beyond existed, this was quite an audacious idea to take an established franchise, that being the animated Batman the animated series and Superman the animated series, and go, we're gonna do a show set in this world, but it's going to be 50 years in the future. Bruce Wayne's a sad old man. There's a teenager that's putting on the cowl. Like, this is quite an audacious pitch, and it's probably it maybe is a bygone era where large production companies and studios were willing to take such risks when it came to their intellectual properties. And I mean, just a big swing to go to teenage Batman of the future and old man Bruce Wayne and all that stuff. Like, what a swing.
Yeah, and the story, or so it's told, from Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett and Paul Dini and Glenn Murakami and Dan Reba, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some of the guys, Kurt Gaeta, Stan Berkowitz, some of the guys, that names that you know from those earlier DCAU shows. But as the stories go, I believe that Jamie Kilner, who was the president of WB at the time, approached Bruce, Tim, and Paul Paul Dini and asked them if they could do something new. And they were looking for some kind of teenage skewed show because while WB liked what was happening with the new Batman Adventures, they felt that it skewed a little too old. So they were looking for something in the, I think, 6 to 12 range or something like that, which is interesting, as we'll talk about, based on how dark this first episode is. But they were looking for something that skewed a little younger than the new Batman Adventures. So I believe Jamie pitched this teenage Batman idea, and right then and there in the room, Bruce and Paul kind of came up with some ideas, maybe along with Alan Burnett, on what that would look like. And Jamie Kilner loved it, said, "Sounds good." They thought they were going to have a little bit of time to come up with a more official pitch. And in fact, they did not. Jamie Kilner said, "You got the green light," which I think, again, speaks to the idea. Very few and far between, I feel like, would studios, especially, or execs, give just sort of an open green light to a project without based on name recognition alone. I think there's very few people nowadays, director wise or producer wise, that carry that weight. I'm sure there still are a few, but not many, that they're just said, okay, yep, unlimited dollars go your way. Go ahead, start working on it. So that weekend, Paul and Bruce worked on it, and they roped Glenn Murakami in, who was working obviously on the new Batman Adventures and had done some stuff, I think, for Superman as well. And then the rest, as they say, is history. You got the typical cast of characters, as we mentioned here with our producers teams. You got James Tucker working on it too, and a whole laundry list of guys that end up working on this show that would have and continue to have life outside of the DCAU and the DC animated world. So Yeah, it is a big swing. And what's interesting, I think some of the things they lined up right away were that it was, it was not going to be, they weren't going to kill Bruce Wayne.
Hmm.
So Bruce had to be a part of it. They wanted to kind of leave him. They said that it would be hard to get people to accept Bruce is dead. Here's the new Batman. So they knew that
Hmm.
Bruce had to be a part of it. Not only that, but they felt like having an older Batman or an older Bruce Wayne in the show would allow them to connect the DNA to the previous Batman the Animated Series world. So right there, they decided, okay, this is world building. We're going to include this and have that mythos kind of grow here from what they'd already built on. They also decided that this comment I found very funny. These are all interviews that we've seen that are available on YouTube. But the creators did not want Bruce Jr. No Bruce Wayne Jr. And the irony is not lost for those that know the outcome ultimately of what happens with with the Batman Beyond character later on. But he was not just going to be a clone of Bruce. 1A of Bruce. We were going to have some differentiating personality traits here. Terry's obviously much more headstrong. Bruce is more conservative and methodical. Terry's a brawler, not classically trained. Bruce obviously comes from this uh, billionaire family. Terry comes from a middle class family. Bruce loses his parents at a young age, under 10. Terry's in his late teens when his dad eventually gets murdered. So there's a bit of a differentiation there. So and that all comes out in a lot of different ways, which includes the embracing of technology since it's set 50 years in the future, and including uh, class differences and class warfare and the way that people live and things that they can afford and the places and the things that we see, the way that Gotham looks, the suit that Batman has. It's all directly influenced here by the future and but still tied significantly to the past in the DCAU. And yeah, it's hard to believe that this was all started out with a pitch in an office, and our showrunners here being very nervous about what this would look like. And then ultimately, this character has been adapted into the actual DC universe, one of the
Hmm.
many DCAU original characters that has been adapted into main continuity too. So I'd say they did pretty well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's iconic in and of itself, apart from it being part of the larger Batman mythos, which is a pretty incredible feather in their cap. And we certainly have more notes that we'll mention about the production as we get to our visuals and music and voice acting talks. But we'll start here with, as we always do, our plot recap of Rebirth Part One. And we open in a very, what would seem like a very typical way to open a Bruce Timm helmed DCAU show. It's a dark night in Gotham as we hear a news reporter telling us about a failed takeover attempt of Wayne Enterprise by some young entrepreneur named Derek Powers.
Big news in the financial world today. Once again, billionaire Bruce Wayne has averted an attempted takeover of his company by Derek Powers of Powers Technology. Powers vowed that he is not through yet, and speculation has seen stock in both men's companies hit all-time highs. Still no word from the kidnappers of debutante Bunny Vreeland following a ransom payment of $5 million. At this
Hey, kid,
hour,
you're on TV.
police remain without leads as to the girl's whereabouts.
We see this old airport hangar where the thugs who have kidnapped her have her tied up, and they mention that they've gotten the money, but unfortunately, since she's seen their faces, it doesn't look like she's going to make it home to her mom, whoever that might be. But before they can take out this young hostage, we see Batman on the scene. It's Bruce, but in his flashy new suit, the iconic suit we'll talk about a little bit in visuals. And we see him taking down some of the thugs. However, the more he seems to be exerting himself, the more we see him gripping at his chest. It's clear that this is not a Batman in his prime and that he's clearly having some health issues.
Are you all right? Ever since I was a kid, Big Bad Batman's always been making life hard for guys like me.
To the point that when he comes face to face with the leader of the group of terrorists, he appears to have, and you already mentioned this, Cal, about how even though this show was designed originally maybe to appeal to younger children, this show starts with Bruce Wayne having a heart attack. That's the first thing that happens of any substance in this show is Batman has a heart attack while he's trying to save a girl. And the head of the bad guy group takes quite a bit of glee in pointing out how Batman has been making life tough for guys like him for 30 some odd years now, and it's time for him to get a little revenge. We see him, well, we don't quite see it, but we hear him laying into Batman with a wrench as we see young Bunny Vreeland shielding her eyes, trying not to look at the savage beating Bruce is taking here. And in fact, Batman gets so desperate that the only thing he can do is look on the ground next to him where he's taken out one of the other thugs. He sees a handgun laying on the ground, and he pulls it to save his own life and perhaps the life of Bunny Vreeland, sending the thug screaming in terror out of the room. However, as Bruce realizes what he's done, he quickly throws down throws down the gun, and we see him walk outside and unmask and sort of hang his head as he walks away from the scene. The cops arriving just at that point to take all of the thugs into custody. And then we cut back to the Batcave where we see a display of the four main Gotham heroes, Batman, Robin, Batgirl, and Nightwing's old costumes on display. And we see Bruce putting the Beyond suit back on display. And we hear him utter just two words as he walks up the stairs of the Batcave.
Never again.
And that is our little prologue that we get here of Bruce. Bruce's last night as Batman. He was so desperate to save himself that he had to pull a gun, obviously that being a big no-no if you're Batman. Well, most versions of Batman, you're not allowed to use a gun. So that's enough for Bruce to throw down the mantle and say that he can no longer be Batman. And then after our theme song, which we'll certainly talk about later in music, we see that 20 years have passed. Now Derek Powers is in control of Wayne Enterprise. It's been renamed Wayne Powers, and we hear about various corporate hostile takeovers and layoffs that he is helming. Imagine that. Imagine like one guy being in control of like half the world and just buying up more companies and laying people off.
Nah, it couldn't happen. Couldn't happen. Doesn't,
That's right.
What a crazy dystopian future that never would come to fruition.
We did it again. That thing that everyone was warning us about, we did it. So,
You know what? Cartoons, everybody
unfortunately.
points to The Simpsons, but I think maybe just
Mhm.
cartoons in general have a way about them of just predicting what might happen.
Absolutely. And we see this news report about Derek Powers is being watched on a subway, although it's not our traditional subway, it's more of an elevator. We'll talk about that later in visuals, as well as here where we meet young Terry McGinnis, who is riding the subway to school. Apparently, he is witness to a clown that is harassing a woman on the subway, a literal clown, as we learn that there's apparently a group, a gang, a roving gang called the Jokers with a Z, that is going around. And after Terry steps in and gives a bit of a beat down to this one Joker, that Joker runs off the subway, and so we establish here that our new protagonist Terry is a no nonsense, doesn't take kindly to bullies, and is willing to throw the first punch for sure. And we see that again moments later as we're introduced to Dana and Chelsea, who are walking through the high school and go to take a sneak peek at the boys wrestling practice, Greco-Roman wrestling, not WWE, though it does maybe resemble more like WWE, as after some trash talking, Terry throws a punch against the big bully Nelson Nash.
If the coach had us do one more lap, I'd be sprouting gills. Sounds like Nelson's got his monkeys rooting for him again. Who's the victim this time? Terry? My money's on Nelson. I wouldn't be too sure, Chelsea. You've never wrestled with him.
Hold, Drag. I got you beat. Funny. You remind me of a Joker I met this morning. Except he was prettier.
Oh boy, not again.
That's it, McGinnis. Get your clothes and get out.
But he just...
But nothing. I saw you throw the first punch. Out.
And there's a big fight. So we're really establishing here that Terry's just a big hothead, and is quite is not he's willing to stand up for what's right, but unfortunately, he's also a bit of a hothead and is a little too anger prone. And we cut back to his home, where we're introduced to his dad, Warren, his definite real dad, Warren McGinnis, who gets a call from an old coworker of his, Harry, who desperately asks Warren to meet with him somewhere, and that he's got to tell him something, and he's got some sort of information he has to disclose to Warren.
Research, McGinnis.
Warren, it's Harry. Can you meet me on the landing right away?
Sure. Is everything all right?
I'll explain when I see you.
Harry, you look slagged.
Never mind that. Here, keep this for me.
What's wrong with your hand?
Nothing. Warren, if anything should happen to me...
There you are, Mr. Tully. You're late for your meeting with Mr. Powers.
Harry!
Come back here!
What's wrong with him?
However, as they're discussing this, we see these black splotches all over Harry's body, and he doesn't really want to talk about what's going on. But before Warren could get any more information about what's on this disc or anything, we see a very large man with a scar on his face walk up and say that Mr. Powers was looking for Harry, and decides to grab hold of Harry and take him away. He struggles a little bit, and one of the other rank and file security guys stabs him with some sort of syringe, which sedates him. And Warren is kind of left wondering what exactly is going on. We do cut to I guess the next day, as Warren's been called into Derek Powers' office. Our first glimpse at our sort of Norman Osborn type character for this series, as he wants to clear up any misconceptions, he says, about what Warren saw on the docks, and says that it was simply an allergic reaction that Harry had suffered, and that he's getting great care, and tells Warren he'll be able to see him in a couple of days. Warren thanks him and goes to leave as Derek and Mr. Fix look on.
I asked you here, Warren, to clear up any misconceptions you might have gotten from that incident with Mr. Tully. Harry simply suffered an allergic reaction to a chemical compound in the lab. Shook him up a bit, but he's under the best of care.
That's great. When can I see him?
Monday morning, first thing.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Don't mention it, Warren. Oh, Warren. Before I forget, there seems to be a file missing from Harry's records. Would you know where it is?
No, sir, I have no idea.
No, of course not.
As Warren returns home, we see him reviewing the data and becoming quite appalled by whatever he's looking at. At that point, Terry comes into the room and tells him that he plans on leaving, and we get this father-son, classic angsty teenage son versus father argument, as Warren keeps sort of taking him to task for his temper and for the issues that Terry keeps exhibiting at school, that he's been in counseling.
Terry, I'm busy.
Dad, I gotta go out.
You're grounded, remember?
I didn't start the fight.
I'll hear all about it when we meet with your counselor. Again.
Mom would hear me out.
You're not living with your mom.
Don't remind me.
That's your problem right there. You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you. I'm bailing.
Terry.
And as Terry leaves, we see Mr. Fix waiting in the shadows now that Warren is alone. And we see Terry head out to they're in line for a nightclub or something in this kind of Times Square area of Gotham. Terry meets up with his girlfriend Dana, who almost, as we'll get to at the end of this episode, from episode 1 deserves better. Let's just make it clear there. Before he's even lying to her about all the Batman stuff. But while Dana and Terry are flirting, we see Nelson, the bully from earlier, arrive with his swanky new car, and is clearly trying to show off his status and wealth. But before any further confrontation between Terry and Nelson can take place, a whole gang of these mysterious jokers shows up, causing havoc, assaulting not only Nelson, but also one of them, the leader, J-Man, grabs hold of Dana briefly. And that, of course, launches Terry into action as he takes down a few of them using some pretty athletic fighting material. We do establish before he's ever in the suit that Terry knows how to handle himself, and he's quite athletic as well. But he's clearly overmatched as even more jokers show up during this melee for backup. And so Dana yells at Terry to get on one of the bikes and flee. And he agrees and takes off, riding away with all of the jokers chasing him. And so the roads are windy. Maybe you don't realize where you're going. Somehow you end up a big, long, windy mountain road. And you arrive at a palatial estate where who should be waiting for Terry and this group of jokers but an old man with a cane.
Aw, the no-fun boy had an accident.
Let's put a smile on his face. Leave him alone. And get off my property. You're trespassing.
Oh, is that right?
It's okay. I can handle this.
Who do you think you're talking to, old man? We're the Jokers.
Sure you are.
There's a bit of melee that immediately ensues at this point as we see that despite the fact he's at quite an advanced age at this point, Bruce Wayne, yeah, he still got it. And with a cane, no less. So between Terry and Bruce, they team up, send the Jokers running with their tails between their proverbial legs as they are handedly defeated. Terry is quite impressed. He turns to compliment Bruce on his athleticism, but by this point we see that Bruce's heart seems to be acting up again. He's grasping his chest and struggling to get into the gate. He's dropped his cane. So Terry and alongside with Ace, who we are introduced to, who is Bruce's new faithful four-legged companion. Despite his maybe not loving Terry so much, Bruce assures him that it's okay. So Terry helps Bruce up the very long pathway. Imagine they couldn't have just gotten on one of the bikes and taken the bike up the pathway. Maybe the Jokers took them all. So they start walking up the very long pathway to Wayne Manor. We then cut inside. We see Bruce sitting in a very large lounge chair, and Terry has gotten his medicine from him. Or for him, rather. Bruce takes it and is able to fend off the imposing heart attack at that point. But I guess the medicine had side effects of just knocking out Bruce immediately. Either that or he was just so stressed out. Or maybe it's just so late at night and he's old. So he just immediately falls asleep. So Terry decides he's going to see himself out at this point. He opens the front door and Ace is outside and immediately growls and starts barking. So Terry thinks otherwise, shuts the door, says he's going to call his dad instead. So he walks over to the phone to pick it up to call his dad. He mentions that he's going to be in trouble, likely grounded for life at this point, once his dad picks up the phone. But then as he goes to dial, he looks over and sees a bat trapped inside a grandfather clock. And he goes over and finds this intriguing. He notes, being of good heart, I guess, and kind to animals, Terry decides he's going to do what he can to free the animal. Maybe he's just a little intrigued as to how the bat itself got stuck in the clock to begin with. Begins feeling around this grandfather clock, and wouldn't you know, he must have tripped the right wire because it slides open. The bat descends down this flight of stairs, and Terry is left to make a decision. Does he stay there and leave, call his dad, or does he go exploring? Of course, being the young, precocious man that he is, he heads down the stairs, flips on the light, and immediately realizes he stumbled upon the Bat Cave. As lights come on, we see Batmobiles and bat wings and all of the old bat suits, and Terry is absolutely starstruck at this point. But he's not able to quite totally and completely comprehend everything because he's immediately struck in the back of the head with a cane as Bruce Wayne has woken up and tells him to get out immediately. And Terry decides at that point that Bruce is crazy and that it's not like he touched anything or did anything, but Bruce doesn't want to have anything to do with him. Throws him out of Wayne Manor. So we then see Bruce, we then cut back to Terry, who has walked home, I guess. And as he arrives at his house, we see his house is torn apart. There's police outside. There's graffiti written all over the outside of the house. We're introduced to Terry's mother, Mary, who's there, and she's speaking rather solemnly.
Dad? Oh my God.
Terry! You're okay.
Mom, what happened?
A robbery. The police say it's the Jokers. They surprised your father.
Where is he? Where's Dad?
Honey,
Dad? Dad!
McGinnis leaves behind 2 sons, seen here with his former wife, Mary. Among the mourners was McGinnis's employer, Derek Powers.
I pledge to use whatever influence I have to see that these creatures pay for their heinous act.
We then cut from that sequence of a very distraught Terry screaming for his dad to a news report where we learn that Terry McGinnis also has a younger brother, Matt. Matt and his mom and Terry were all at the funeral for Mr. McGinnis. At this point, we cut to a interview with Derek Powers, who has sworn his valuable resources to catch the monsters that have done this to one of his lovely employees, and promises that they will bring these monsters to justice. Sure. So with Warren, with Warren now deceased, we see Terry sitting on his bed, struggling to come up with a reason as to why and how his dad was killed. He can't figure it out as to why Warren would have answered the door knowing that the Jokers were there, that he was smart enough to look outside of his window first.
That friend of yours, Dana, called. She left her number. Have you eaten anything yet? Tare, you haven't said a word all day. Don't you want to talk?
Why would he open the door, Mom?
What?
They were Jokers. He wouldn't have opened the door. He would have looked first. How'd they trace me back to him?
Honey, we don't know if it's the same gang. You've got to stop.
I should have been there. I could have helped him. I could have done something.
No.
Yes! I'm not afraid of those guys. We could have fought them off, me and Dad. We could have fought. I yelled at him, Mom. He grounded me, and I wouldn't listen. The things I said. I'm such a jerk.
We then cut to the next day as we see Terry and Matt in the house, and Terry's carrying a box of his father's things. Terry trips and spills them all over his room. And before he ushers Matt out of the room, he notices that there's a frame on the floor. He picks it up, and there's a disc sticking out of the back of said frame. Curiosity killed the bat, so to speak. So what does he do? He loads a strange disc into his computer. I would just like to advise anyone listening, if you find a strange disc or drive or event, anything computer related on the ground, I would never advise sticking it in your computer, because you never know what's on it. And that is your daily tip today to avoid potentially completely losing everything on your computer. So thanks. Don't say that the DCAU review isn't educational as well as fun, okay? But back to the show. As Terry plugs it in, we see that this is the information that Warren was reviewing from our insider that was leaking things from inside of Wayne Powers. Terry is blown away by the information that he sees there. Matt breaks back in for a moment, but Terry quickly shuts his laptop and decides that he needs more help than the police can give him at this point. He has his poor girlfriend, Dana, drive him all the way out to Wayne Manor in the middle of the night again and leave him there without any explanation for what he's doing. So he's dropped off at the gates of Wayne Manor, tells her to go home. He then calls up on the intercom.
Yeah, looks like we got lucky.
If you just keep on this road, it curves back to the freeway.
I can't leave you out here.
Sure you can. I just have to see this guy.
About what?
I'll explain later. You better go before the storm hits. Go! Come on, I know you're in there. Listen to me, something stinks in your company. I think it cost my old man his life. The answer's on this. I'd take it to the cops, but you know how cozy they are with Powers? How about you taking a look? Yeah, I should have known you wouldn't care. You're no Batman, you whacked out old fraud. Back off, Scooby. It's me.
And that apparently is challenging enough for Bruce to open the gates. And we cut to Bruce staring out of the window at Wayne Manor as we see Terry walking his way up the winding road once again to meet with Bruce as we end part 1 of Rebirth.
Absolutely. So, well, as we can talk about our plots, we'll get our original scores in a moment here, Cal. But yeah, I think this is such an interesting choice, and obviously, as we talked about, this debuted both parts aired together in a primetime event, as with some of the other series that started that way, like Superman. But for a part 1, which is how we're digesting this, for a show called Batman Beyond, they make you wait for it. Terry does not suit up in this part 1, and so it's all about just this is 22 minutes of just building up the world. We see what happened to Bruce that made him retire, and then we sort of get to know what this Gotham is. From the we'll talk more about that in visuals, but from the aesthetic of the world to maybe how it works depending on how much money you have, as you mentioned, sort of the class structure, to then we have to introduce this kid Terry and him being this sort of hot-headed, punch first, ask questions later character, but also making it clear that he is still, generally speaking, a good person, that he's trying to do the right thing and stand up for himself and stand up to various bullies in his life. And then also we have to introduce him to Bruce. We have to have some kind of conflict there, and then also have this underlying sort of corporate espionage intrigue going on. And then we have to Uncle Ben Warren. So we have a lot of plates to spin in this first 22 minutes. And so I think it's really compelling, despite the fact that this is pretty light on quote unquote superhero action, other than our little prologue. As far as the story goes, it's just all building blocks. It's all character development and world building. And I think that works because it's all very compelling.
No, I agree with you. Completely. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff to do, and we talk about that when we have done a lot of the origin story episodes of different characters, whether it's Last Son of Krypton or even later on when you're introducing some of the other ancillary supporting characters to Superman the Animated Series in those later episodes of the final seasons of that show, or some of the other things that you're trying to introduce with the Martian Manhunter's backstory and Justice League, and there's all kinds of ways to do this, and I think this one had to be different and in some ways had a little bit of an advantage because you are building from scratch. Like you're taking there's a couple of things that they had to include here, obviously, or decided to include. Bruce Wayne is there, but he's not Batman anymore. So you kind of get to design this archetype of a teenage superhero. And we've talked about it throughout the years that we've done reviews of Batman Beyond, and that is that Spider-Man clearly lives in the DNA. The classic 50s and 60s Spider-Man comics, or 60s Spider-Man comics, live in the DNA of this show. The young superhero who's trying to balance high school and love and social life and all the things that a young teenager is going through. Oh, also they have this incredible gift to balance with and this mantle of a superhero that they have to carry, and responsibility that comes with it. And also they have to they're learning all these life lessons on the fly. Oh, also they have these expectations to live up to based on sometimes their own self expectations, but also in this one it's a little more unique because Spider-Man obviously doesn't have quite the mentor relationship of somebody kind of standing over him to tell him right from wrong, or to how to shape him in that way. This one you have Terry who has a previous Batman that kind of he has to look up to and has to work with, and as we see, ultimately shapes who he becomes as Batman. But I do like that they had more freedom with this than you would. You didn't have base material to that you had to go off of. So you did get to be a little bit more free, and this character is intentionally, as they talk about in some of those interviews, the producers and the show writers talk about, they wanted him to be dynamically different from Bruce. So where we see Bruce, who is super serious. They wanted Terry to be a little bit lighter and a little bit quippier. Bruce has cut himself off from a social life and romances for the most part. In the DCAU version of Batman, and Terry is not. He's a crappy boyfriend, but he has a love interest, and that is, as much as we joke about it, that is such a big part of this character, is him balancing this life as a superhero with his relationship with his girlfriend. But it's also his friends at school, and it's also his dealing with this guilt about his being responsible, or maybe not being responsible, but for not loving and being respectful to his dad in his final moments, and kind of saying this really hurtful thing to his dad is the final thing he ever said to him. So yeah, it is very fascinating that, I think, looking at this in a 22-minute vacuum, obviously this was presented as an hour-long presentation back in the day, and was later cut up into multiple episodes for the rebroadcast. But for the podcast, obviously, that we're doing with this re-review, looking at it as a single episode, it has a lot in 22 minutes that they cram in there, and I didn't feel like much suffered. Like, I feel like it moves at a good pace. It doesn't drag at any point. It also doesn't feel like it moves too fast at any point. I feel like it's paced very well to set up this world, explain kind of the high points of what they want to get across here. It's the future. Technology is here. There's advancements. Gotham is still very much linked to its past in class fighting and technology, and these gangs and crime, and all of that is still very much in the DNA of what Gotham is, but it looks different and it's structured different. And oh yeah, this is the guy that we're going to be following for the next 51 episodes after this. This is who your new Batman is, and oh yeah, and he's going to have a relationship with the Batman that you've always grown up with and known. So in a way, it feels like this was the natural way of aging up your audience in a weird way, but Batman aging down. But yeah, fantastic setup here. I know originally I gave the plot a 8 out of 10 for my original score. And again, we're splitting it up into 2 weeks, obviously, and we're not changing our scores officially. But I think this would be hard for me not to give a 10, just based on, I think, how much they had to do in recognizing the successful execution of what they ultimately did here.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, is that when you cram that much into, again, this is just the first 22 minutes, you would almost expect it to be like, oh, there's not enough time for these moments to breathe, like, Warren's death, or even giving him those couple little scenes to establish a little bit of his personality before we fridge him, before we kill him off to be the, as we said, sort of the Uncle Ben type, or the Thomas Wayne type, I guess. Yeah, I think letting you understand his character a little bit, and who he is, and sort of the strange relationship that he and Terry have, is really, really compelling. So when that moment comes, and then you see Terry's like complete devastation, that the last thing he ever said to his father was an argument, that he yelled at him. That was their last interaction before his father died, and how that guilt that is going to carry him. It's unique because obviously, whether it's Batman, or, as we keep kind of talking about, there's a lot of Spider-Man in the DNA of this character, especially the early Steve Ditko version. like that parental guilt or that father figure dying guilt, but it is a little bit different than Bruce's guilt or Peter Parker's guilt, I guess theoretically, because it really comes down to just, Terry not being able to, not being appreciative of him while he was there. And that hot-headed temper that we keep seeing Terry display throughout the episode has now sort of created this haunting memory of the last interaction he has with his father. I think it's really, really powerful. And I think all of that stuff is really good. The bitterness you feel in Bruce Wayne just in the few minutes we spend with him in this episode is really, really powerful. And it's like, it is sad. And to see the character, and obviously Justice League hadn't happened yet, but we see him even in the new Batman adventures and BTOS, and he had friends, whether it was Alfred or Robin or Batgirl or Commissioner Gordon, whoever. And now it's like, now he's just this old broken down man with a dog living in this like gothic castle in the middle of nowhere.
It's
and he's
literally a haunted
house.
It's a haunted. It's like every. I mean, I'm getting into the visuals now, but it's definitely it's portrayed as, imagine you're watching a movie as a kid, like a classic 80s or 90s movie, and the kid stumbles upon this creepy house that looks scary, looks haunted, and then there's this even creepier, scary old man that's like hanging out in the window of that house. It's very, very, very Hitchcockian in the way that it's portrayed as this. Yeah, it's haunted. It's dark. Like when he goes inside with Terry, like it is pitch black in that house. There is no light there. And it's a direct reflection of the character and where he's progressed to at this point, or regressed to, I guess, at this point, in that his only friend is this dog who's also pitch black, by the way, and is dark and mean and nasty, and kind of mimics that same attitude that Bruce has.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's just so much despair. And it is funny watching this as an adult, and like beyond the basics of him just being old and broken down, you watch it and you're like, oh, he's really depressed. Like the only thing he ever wanted was, the only thing that he truly found purpose in was Batman, and when that was stripped away from him, it, obviously it sort of mimics the journey the character goes on in the Dark Knight Returns, the famous Frank Miller story. That feeling of where you almost see like that weird like grin he gets on his face when the Jokers show up and start threatening him, where it's like he finally gets to like let a little of this pent up raging beast that is his soul finally gets like unleashed for just a couple of minutes. And then of course you immediately see the physical toll it takes on him when he does. But that's like that moment where you do feel like, oh, he's happy now because he got to beat up a bad person, and he hasn't gotten to do that in 20 years. So I think like the brief glimpses of Bruce we get, this is still very much Terry's show, and a lot of the runtime goes to establishing Terry and his supporting cast and his personality. But just these glimpses we get of Bruce are so powerful because he does take on this sort of mythic, like you said, like this gothic horror figure, of this, like he's a ghost basically that appears to Terry, and as we'll see in part 2 and other episodes, it's sort of Terry that's bringing him back to life, almost literally. All that being said, if I were to disagree, if we were to rescore this, I think it's a 10 for me. I think, again, we'll see where we are after the second part. Maybe we'll find things to nitpick there. But again, just for all they had to do in this first episode, from establishing Terry and Bruce and the supporting cast and the Jokers and Derek Powers and all of these characters that you have to introduce, and then also introduce this whole new futuristic Gotham as a backdrop for it. It's like Man, what a great job for 22 minutes. Unsurprisingly, when you see the names Alan Burnett and Paul Dini on the writing credits and the script credits, perhaps. But yeah, what a great job they did on this first part here, and great. And if we talk about, since we're just talking about part one, we get to talk about the cliffhanger, which we never really get to talk about. When we review the two-parters together, which is you have that amazing scene of the gate sort of slowly swinging open, and Terry walking through the gate and talking to Ace, and then you just see Bruce like the Grinch or something, like staring down from his mountain. And we'll certainly talk about that in visuals as well. But just that, it's a great cliffhanger of, we still don't really know what Bruce is going to do, what Terry's going to do, and and how uneasy this new potential alliance is going to be between them. So a great cliffhanger. As far as that's, I feel like another thing when we split these episodes up into individual parts to review, it's also fun just seeing how it works as its own episode, even though it's a two-parter.
Yeah, I agree. I got like I said Hitchcockian already, but some like Rear Window type things with the guy,
yes.
the neighbor spying on the the activities there, with Bruce just kind of looking down there from his unfortunate self prison there. Yeah, it's incredible. I would agree. I think just for what we're looking at here, and it's interesting. I remember, we didn't really talk about our personal memories of this, but I remember vividly when the trailer for this came out, and I think we probably had it on VHS and watched it probably 100 times, and we're like trying to guess like who the characters are, and not really understanding, what. It was a 30-second trailer or whatever it was. There was no like this, other than like Batman of the future. We didn't quite get what was going on, and there was an old Bruce Wayne in the cliff, obviously. But just seeing this again now, some 30 plus years later, it brought back some of those memories of sitting there and watching this in prime time, and us just being like, wow. And I remember us being, I feel like we were initially kind of, we were kind of speculative about, I don't know whether or not this is going to be good or not. We were suspect as to whether or not it would be something as good. And I think even probably our dad was like, it's not going to be any good. It's what are they, a teenage Batman? Sure. Okay. And we were like, yeah, it's going to be dumb. And then we're like, oh my gosh, we're in on this thing, like immediately. And the fact that they drop you in on old Bruce Wayne and then connect that along the way there. Yeah. Really great stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. They really do just a great job of establishing this world and making it compelling right off the bat. And of course, a big part of that is the visuals and animation, which we will transition to talking about here. As previously noted, we have Coco and Dong Yang on our animation team for this episode, and Kurt Gaeta is our director. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a probably maybe the biggest section of the day just to talk about, because so much of this show, I think, all the elements we've talked about are obviously represented in the plot, and we'll certainly talk about music and voice acting as well. But the look of this show to create a futuristic Gotham City that still feels like the Gotham from the old show, but just sort of, brighter and neon. And as we talked about, Bruce Timm and Glenn Murakami, who did a lot of the Glenn Murakami, especially doing a lion's share of the design work, along with people like James Tucker and Glenn Wong and Darwin Cook. It's trying to create a future when there's been so many other futuristic shows, and all the discussions that have to be had about, are the cars going to fly? How many of the cars are going to fly? What are how Blade Runner-y do we get? And they talked about wanting to avoid any sort of specific homages, and instead maybe looking to more like Akira and some of the Japanese anime style, sort of slightly dystopian, sort of tech-based futures that you might see in some of those like sort of golden age, as we've alluded to before. Eastern animation is certainly not certainly not our area of nerd to speak about with any sort of expertise. But I know they specifically mentioned Akira, including the red motorcycle that Terry drives throughout this episode is straight ripped from that particular anime. But so they sort of went with more of that Japanese anime influence for the buildings and the architecture. And there's actually a note that on the commentary track, which you can hear, was originally recorded for the DVD release and survived to the Blu-ray release as well. Glenn Murakami mentions that legendary comic book creator Mike Mignola, of course, the creator of Hellboy, and has done quite a lot of work, and actually did some design work on the original Batman the Animated Series. Helped them a little bit in the sort of pre-production days of the show. Not all of his concepts made it in, but he did sort of give them the idea that a lot of the suits were going to have a sort of Victorian era cut to the jackets and the sort of style of the clothes for your rank and file, especially for your businessmen, your upperclassmen, to have this sort of, you have like the fluffy wrists and it's not something I necessarily would have picked up, but when you see it, you go, oh yeah, this is kind of like it kind of does feel like Renaissance era, just sharpened up and with like maybe a few less frills, but it has this very sort of Victorian quality to the clothing, because as Bruce Timm and Glenn Murakami and some of those other people would say, who knows what fashion's going to look like in 50 years, but we can, they sort of settle on that sort of European Victorian era design for a lot of the characters. And then their other big note was no lapels on the suit jackets. Apparently after drawing nothing but double-breasted suits for 10 years on Batman and Superman, they were tired of the lapels. So, but yeah, it's just interesting how immediately they nailed the aesthetic of the show, and how it's this kind of grimy world, and as you mentioned, Cal, there's kind of this class nature to it with how the city is sort of set up. It's a really compelling and interesting to look at world right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other featurettes that's available, I believe it's on the World's Finest YouTube channel. Shout out to our friends at World's Finest if you want to check that out. But there's a couple of really neat featurettes. I'm assuming that we're probably on one of the DVDs, if not on the Blu-ray also. But specifically talking about the design of Gotham, they mentioned how their vision for it was a continued growth and melting pot, not all that different than how people perceive and view New York City. So obviously Gotham is a stand-in for New York City, as we've talked about, or if you talk to Kevin Altieri, it is New York City. So, they just kind of continue down that pathway, which is why you have some of the Asian influence. They imagined like that some of the, at that time, the modern neo influence from Japan moved over, and part of the big melting pot of different cultures kind of meshing all together. Honestly, not all that different than 2026 America, to be honest, but the meshing of cultures had created this specific look of somewhat dystopian neon Japan from the late 90s, and then some of the building structure and the buildings are kind of angular but are also all tall. They talked about how they wanted the buildings to be huge and size was important. They wanted people to feel very, very tiny. They wanted it to look dangerous, and for Batman to be able to move. It was designed for Batman to be able to fly in and through it, is how they went. Since they obviously made some upgrades to the Batsuit, which we can talk about in a second. But ultimately, they said it's still Gotham, so it's got to have some grime to it. It's got to have some dirt to it. And that's why the class system, as you mentioned, they were like, what if we had the rich people are able to move higher? Like they're literally above the poorer classes. So all of these penthouses and all of these gigantic structures, all of the rich people live up there. Meanwhile, your lower classes live on the lower levels of the city. And as you mentioned in that first sequence that we get where we're introduced to Terry, he's taking a Glenn Murakami designed subway that doesn't move horizontally, it moves vertically. It's this vertical subway that he created and presented to Bruce Timm that they love so much that they included it. So that's just one instance of sort of the design changes and the influences that they decided to go with for how Gotham looked. One of the other things that Dan Reba talks about, a friend of the show, Dan Reba, of course, is that the color for the skies. If you look at the night skies, the new Batman Adventures skies were blood red. The Superman the animated series skies were always blue. And then he said they decided, let's mesh them together to create the Batman Beyond skies, which ended up being purple. With the exception of the daytime, they said when it was daytime, they decided to go with these orange sort of twilight type of skies. So if you look anywhere, no matter what time of day it is, if it's daytime, the skies are the orange, whether it's sunrise or sunset, and then our nighttime skies are those purple. So even in the color palettes, they went with something different there. So yeah, lots of it felt like that because they were moving from the new Batman Adventures, from Superman, you're obviously keeping this sort of streamlined look to the characters, but you're introducing this whole new sandbox. You can kind of use your mind or your imagination to come up with things. And it sounded like some of that fun transitioned into the Batsuit, which I think is a good opportunity for us to talk about not only the look of the Batsuit. Obviously, it's not in this episode, but maybe we'll talk about that in episode 2 then, I guess, because it's not in this episode. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm getting excited. But as far as this show, we do see the Batsuit briefly, I guess, in our opening sequence. But the decision to go with this streamlined black suit with the blood red bat symbol on the front, really, they decided that it made sense for Bruce's evolution of the suit to go from darkness. He was so dark, he's so shadowy and still, and then you're going to give him this upgraded suit in that opening sequence where he's just kind of become one with the shadows, but his way of striking fear into people is this gigantic, almost blood shaped bat on his chest that reminds them, that kind of like a warrior type thing of, First Blood Rambo, like, spreading the blood on your chest to show how badass you are. So there's a lot, obviously, more to talk about in part 2 with the suit upgrades and stuff like that. But as far as the way that Gotham looks, the suits, the way that the motif of this 50 years from now, whenever now is, they did a pretty good job as in kind of interacting here. One of the things they also mentioned with classes, I know, is the flying car thing. They were like, well, people always think that we're going to have flying cars in the future. So they said, well, if we had flying cars 50 years from now, let's take the idea that the technology might not be affordable for those lower class. So really the people in this show that end up with the flying cars are the rich, which is another interesting bit that they did there. So yeah, I love the way that this show obviously looks, and especially in the up-res HD look in 2026. It looks beautiful. The colors really pop. Some of the sequences. There's not a ton of action, obviously. It's a lot of talking in this episode, but there is some action in the Terry versus the Joker sequence. He does throw a punch, obviously, at Nelson Nash. But a lot of it is just kind of setting up these initial places where everybody's hanging out and who everybody is. So really, I think the visual uptick comes when we get the Joker's chase, and then ultimately the introduction of Wayne Manor and kind of this dark, scary, haunted house that we talked about. So that really drives home the visuals for this episode. So I originally, this is for part 1 and 2, I had given animation visuals an 8 out of 10. I think I would probably stick to about an 8 out of 10 for right now, and figure out where I would go next week, just because there wasn't a ton of action for this week. And I know you gave animation visuals a 9 out of 10. So any thoughts on wavering that or anything else that may have stuck out for you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. I'd probably keep it around there so far. We'll see as we get definitely more action in part 2. Perhaps I'll feel stronger then. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like a lot of our notes this week were just about the overall design of the show. I do think the action sequences are quite fun. We already talked about. I think you really nailed it with the haunted house. That final scene with the wind is picking up and the lightning is striking, and we see Terry look up to the mansion, which is entirely in silhouette, and you just see the lightning bolt striking behind it. It's so, very, very, as you said, very haunted mansion or something like that. And then the image of Bruce staring through the window, very, very, very dramatic, and just dripping with just dramatic tension in that scene. And that's one other thing they mentioned, I think, in some of the special features, is that there's a lot of purples and blues that we get in the color palette, especially they noted for background characters if they're not speaking, especially in larger crowd scenes like at school, just because they thought that was a good way to build in the sort of build in the color palette of the show, and then also help your main characters stand out when they're against those backgrounds. So they there's a lot of scenes that the bat cave in this first episode is very much bathed in this sort of purple monochromatic look to it, and then the scene in Terry's bedroom has this washed out blue color to it all. It's very, so they're really getting some very stylized with the color in this first episode here, which I think are quite striking as well.
I agree.
And from there, Cal, we will move on to our third category, which of course is music. We have Lolita Ritmanis credited with the score for part one, though of course we will also be talking about the great Batman Beyond theme song from the great Christopher Carter. It's funny, there's a note on one of the commentary tracks that they weren't really sure if Shirley Walker and Christopher Carter, Michael McQuistion, Lolita Ritmanis, their regular collaborators, if they were going to keep them on for Batman Beyond, just because they were, all of those shows had these traditional orchestral soundtracks, and they weren't sure the sort of techno rock, edgy, punky music that they were going to be going for was something in their repertoire. And so Lolita and Christopher and Michael and Shirley kind of compiled this demo CD for Bruce and Paul and everyone to listen to. And a couple of the tracks from Lolita, I believe, are featured in this episode, as is, of course, an early demo version of Christopher Carter's music, which would become the Batman Beyond theme. So to say that our dynamic music partners, and along with the great Shirley Walker, sort of still shepherding things at this point, were up to the task of a complete musical change. They were up to the task, to say the least.
Yeah, it's crazy to think now, especially how legendary Miss Walker and obviously the dynamic music partners have become, especially in the world of the DCAU, that anyone would have doubted them. But it's understandable, because it is such a shift in the way that things go. And you can tell, especially for this episode, by how they introduce the music. So in the first sequence that we get where Bruce is still Batman, we have the more traditional strings and orchestral arrangement when it comes to our soundtrack for that sequence, and it's not until we get to our theme song, which, by the way, my favorite fun fact about the theme song is the original demo of it was presented to Bruce Timm, and ultimately the piece that ultimately became our theme song was originally titled "Smells Like Cream Spinach," as an homage to of course the famous Nirvana song "Smells Like Teen Spirit." So it was just the idea of this grungy influence that Bruce Timm actually provided some guidance, I believe. Some of the influences that he suggested were, I think it's Nine Inch Nails and maybe Jane's Addiction and a couple of other of those grungy, harder rock bands from like the late 90s. But obviously with Nine Inch Nails, they had such a unique sound where they had that harder rock influence, but so much of it was synthesizer and keys that kind of influenced the sound itself, with the percussion being this drum machine sound. So Bruce Timm had a very specific sound that he had in mind. So maybe it was more of a challenge of of yeah, you guys might not be able to pull this off as a way to try and encourage them, because boy howdy did they end up executing. Because from the get-go here, we'll talk more about the visuals of the actual intro next week, but as soon as you hear that running uh, synth at the beginning of the Batman Beyond track that then has this loud noises that kind of come in, and then the driving guitar as the percussion comes in at the same time, and it just wow. It sets itself, just like the rest of the show, it sets itself apart from anything you were used to before with Batman soundtracks. And the fact that these composers that were obviously so gifted with doing the stuff for whether it was Superman the animated series or Batman the animated series, or the new Batman adventures, the fact that they created such a different sound, but it came from these same incredible musical minds is just fascinating to me. The fact that you can come up with something that's so beautiful and classical from what we were used to this, which is just an influence of rock and metal and a bunch of sounds that seem to be total opposite for what we were used to. And it plays really well here. I think you can tell for this episode that I think they were still trying a couple of different things. Some of the tracks are more piano heavy. Some of it is the guitar just comes in to wail a little bit, which kind of gave me some I don't know, some not more like 80s drama shows, police drama, stuff like that you would hear just kind of a wailing guitar come in. But the drum machine is obviously we're not used to hearing anything other than typical orchestral drums for the most part, with the exception of an episode here or there that included some jazzy drums. But the drum machine sound of percussion that kind of leads throughout some of the pieces for this episode is something that really stands out to kind of set the tone, pun intended, for what this episode's music is all about.
Absolutely, yeah. It's again, just like we talked about with all the visual changes, the musical change is definitely much needed to establish this new world or this new time period that we're in. But yeah, just an incredible job. Yeah, I remember, at least on the DVDs, there was an Easter egg you could find if you clicked over on like the side of one of the menus, where you could hear "It Smells Like Cream Spinach," the original demo. I don't know if that survived Blu-rays or not, but I think, and I don't know if Christopher Carter has made that track available anywhere. I know he has his own YouTube and social medias as well. But yeah, just a really strong way to start out. Again, like you said, having that opening scene with Bruce, have the very traditional TNBA music, and then transitioning into that Christopher Carter theme is so amazing and so dynamic and exciting. It just feels like we're just pressing the gas, like we're just zooming down the road now as soon as that music kicks in. And even some of the way in those softer moments where you still have the guitars underneath, but there's also this kind of noodling piano in the later half of it, like from when Terry comes home and finds out about his dad, to when he's going back to when he's going back to Wayne Manor at the end, as Dana's leaving him on the side of the road, and he's standing there shouting up at Bruce. You just hear these really cool effects and synthesizers along with the guitar, and then this sort of really it almost sounds like the Michael Myers Halloween theme. Speaking of all of our Haunted Mansion moments there, where it's got this undercurrent of this like noodling piano to it as well, which I think is really, really compelling as well. So yeah, just a great job. I don't know what we gave music at the time. I missed it if you said it, but I mean, gosh, so far we'll see how we feel after part 2. But yeah, I'd be at a 9, if not a 10, almost from minute 1 of this, I think.
Yeah. So our scores were absolutely shocking to me. And you actually, before we went on the air, reminded me as to perhaps the reason why my score was so low. I went with a 5 originally, and you gave it a 7. So I think maybe at the time we weren't doing including like the theme song. Obviously, this would be the intro to the theme song. It's kind of a gray area, like since every episode has our theme songs in it for our opening credits. Is it fair to just give the first episode credit for that theme song and none of the other ones? We've made up our own rules here, so I guess so. It is fair. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the music slaps in this episode. I think the chase sequence with the Jokers chasing after Terry on the bikes before we get up to the haunted Wayne Manor soundtrack is really good. The theme that plays when Terry comes to the realization that his dad is dead is really haunting. I remember that sequence. We didn't even talk about it in visuals, but that scene stuck with me and made like that gave me emotional trauma as a child. Like I remember thinking about that and being freaked out so bad. And obviously I was 11, I guess, when this show debuted. So I wasn't like a little kid. It just like the idea of coming home and your parent being murdered and this day glow spray paint being spray painted all over your house, accompanied by the music. And that music in rewatching today reminded me is like this music is haunting. And then, we'll talk about the voice acting later on, but all of that plays together to really, really make that scene very haunting and memorable. But yeah, that music's great, as you already mentioned. When Terry goes back up to Gotham or to Wayne Manor rather, and is begging for Bruce or taunting Bruce in a way, challenging Bruce to open the gates. The music that plays there is really, really, yeah, it's really eerie. And powerful in its own way. And then when the gate swings open and you hear the creak of the gate and the shadow casts across the little intercom box, and the music really swells there as Terry walks in to walk up the hill. Oh man, so good. But yeah, the music here in this first part, again, it's just setting itself apart in a way that makes it very memorable. I think it would settle into a little bit of a rhythm, good or bad. I don't think that's good or bad. I think that's just ultimately what we came into. I think we lost some of the usage of like the softer instruments, the piano, and we kind of leaned into the more percussion and drum machines and guitars later on. But it's interesting to hear such a different sound compared to what the rest of the DCAU at this time sounded like. Especially with a brand new set of characters being introduced. So, yeah, no classic Shirley Walker Batman theme used in this episode. Not even a hint of it when he shows up. So, it's standing out on its own and doing its own thing here. And I think I would have. I don't know how I gave this a 5 out of 10. Foolish young Cal. We have a long conversation to talk about from 370 some episodes ago. But what are we gonna do? Yeah, we all make mistakes, and I think mine was giving this episode a 5 out of 10 for music. But I guess we'll see what happens after next week's episode.
Absolutely, Cal. And that will bring us to our final category, which, of course, is voice acting. Andrea Romano, of course, returned to be the voice director and casting director for this show. We have a whole new cast of characters, along with our returning Bruce Wayne, who is, of course, someone we've talked about many times, but a whole new huge cast to talk about here. Whom we've talked about many times, of course, because we just recently finished Batman Beyond. But let's go back to the beginning with our very large voice cast, because we introduced so many of the supporting characters, even though they all only get maybe a line or two. We do have just a giant cast to talk about here.
Yeah, we sure do. A couple of fun ones here before we even shift all the way into the future. So in our flashback scene with Bruce and Bruce's final night, we do have a couple of memorable and noteworthy voices there. So playing our anchor woman, you probably recognized her voice immediately if you're a DCAU nerd like us, but the great CCH Pounder was our anchor woman, who was giving our little bit of little little bit of narration there as to how our young Miss Vreeland had been kidnapped. And then, speaking of kidnapped, one of our kidnappers was actually voiced. I believe it's the guy with a wrench that talks about the story of how Batman has ruined guys like him ever since he was a kid. And that voicing that guy was Reno Romano, who of course not only is known for playing Spider-Man. Speaking of the Spider-Man DNA in this show, Spider-Man's voice later on, he would go on to play Spider-Man in a couple of the PlayStation Legendary.
Soon. And in Spider-Man Unlimited, which was coming out almost simultaneously, funny enough.
Very funny. And then, of course, he himself would go on to play the Batman in The Batman. So the later on Kids WB cartoon, standalone cartoon that had nothing to do with the DCAU, the first attempt at a Batman cartoon post Batman the Animated Series. Yeah, he would go on to play Batman. So those are a couple fun ones there. Again, they're not asked to do much, but it is fun to note their voices involved there for this particular project. And then we also have Jack Roth, who plays our virtual newsman later on. Speaking of newsmen, this is his one and only appearance apparently as this newsman. We also have Sam McMurray, who plays Harry Tully, and Sam McMurray, very famously, if you're a fan of 1990s and 2000s sitcoms, you would probably recognize this guy's face. I believe he plays Chandler's boss on Friends at one point. Then he goes on to play Doug's boss on The King of Queens. So he was the guy that you went to and cast as being the boss of people in different shows. And I believe he's still active today. He's got some acting credits. Most recently played some characters in one of those NCIS shows, which probably has 482 episodes and is probably still running on one of the networks at this point. But yeah, so of note, just because of who he is, he's a character actor, and if you're a fan of those 90s sitcoms like I am, you would definitely recognize his face. Also, briefly,
absolutely. I just want to mention also, I forgot to say in visuals, Harry, I think, is based on Harry Osborn, because he has kind of the weird, like, wavy orange hair, and obviously, as we've said, there's so much Ditko Spidey in this show anyway. I just assumed he's kind of, and obviously Derek being our sort of Norman Osborn stand-in. I just thought, I assume that's who he's based on. He didn't look like a specific actor, but he has like the weird wavy cornrow orange hair and the turned up nose and everything that made me think he's probably based on Harry Osborn.
Spot on there. And then we have briefly Yvette Lowenthal playing Chelsea, of course, who is one of classmates with Terry. She comes back later on to play Chelsea, of course, in the show. And of course, her boyfriend, who she mentions as she's talking to Dana, that her boyfriend, who she happens to mention that if Dana is doubting Nelson's ability to beat Terry, she's clearly never wrestled with him. Thought that was a funny line that Chelsea snuck in there. Again, this was marketed for 6 to 12-year-olds, and these are the type of lines that we're sneaking in there. But of course, voicing her boyfriend, or I'm not sure if he's technically her boyfriend or just her boyfriend with benefits, is of course Seth Green, legendary voice actor and actor, I guess, in lots of different things. Of course, maybe most prominently in the Austin Powers trilogy, playing Scott Evil, and of course, more recently, he's done Robot Chicken. And I think we'll probably, speaking of shows that have over 450 episodes, Family Guy, of course, Chris Griffin in Family Guy. Not a lot for Mr. Green to do here, but we know that it's fun that we see him come back multiple times, and he definitely plays the foil to Terry so well. Like, he plays that grimy bully in a way that's so believable, and doesn't necessarily sound like the typical nerdy type of speech that we expect from a Seth Green character. He plays like the buff jock bully in a way that's spot on, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a credit to him as a voice actor. He's anything but tall and buff in his real life. No offense to him, but he's a smaller guy. I mean, that was kind of his bread and butter as a comedic actor, was kind of being the comedy sidekick or something and things. So having him play the jock is a great bit of sort of ironic casting, but to his credit as a voice actor, and that's one of the wonderful things about voice acting that we often talk about, is how you can get cast in roles as a voice actor that you are unlikely to ever achieve in live action, to say the least. And he does a good job being the obnoxious jock who you know earns the punch in the face that Terry gives him, even though we know ultimately we're not supposed to hit our classmates. But man, he's just so smarmy.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of obnoxious people that deserve to be punched in the face, the J-Man character, of course, the Joker's leader or de facto leader in this episode, the one who dares to step into the face of Bruce Wayne and challenge him about having never heard of the Joker's gang, of course, is a little voice actor by the name of Bruce Timm. This is a fun one always, of course, and I think this is hilarious to me for many reasons, of Bruce Timm voicing this very annoying, self-confident character. But the funniest thing to me is that my memory of the Batman Beyond promo, the very first one, is that howling laugh that Bruce Timm gives as the Jokers show up and he does like his little wheelie. And that laugh has stayed in my head for the better part of 30 years now. And they reuse it a couple times in the in the show, and it's so annoying that it just fits that character so well. So fun stuff, and a fun, neat little factoid that we like to always, whenever we do our yearly happy birthday post to Bruce Timm, we mention that we try to portray him as being more remembered for the voice of J-Man than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, famously years ago, one of our few disagreements was over me not loving him as the Mad Bomber voice in the Gray Ghost episode. But I will say, I think he was great as J-Man, because to me, like, I don't know, the whole idea is that this guy is a loser who's pretending to be the Joker, but he's just like he's just like this dork. And so the energy that, like, it sounds like Bruce Timm is doing like a half-ass Mark Hamill Joker impression, and he's not doing it convincingly, and that works completely, because then when he tries to be menacing, a la the original Joker, and Bruce just smiles at him and beats the tar out of him, you're like, yeah, of course, because this guy is not, this guy is all flash and no substance, so to speak. So I think he does a great job playing this, like, he's cosplaying as a real bad guy when he's really kind of just this this J-Man's just this kind of dork, which I think is kind of a fun element to it.
Absolutely. More small parts for this. No small actors, only small parts. But speaking of one of our younger actors for this episode, we had Ryan O'Donoghue providing the voice of Matt McGinnis here for the first time. He'll, of course, return in several episodes here. What's interesting about Mr. O'Donoghue is that this is not his first DCAU role. He actually appears in the episode Legends of the Dark Knight as one of the kids in that episode as well. So apparently he did well enough, and his voice acting credits, he was in like a ton of other Disney things, like every one of those direct-to-video sequels from the 90s that one of those successful movies had. He's like providing voices in that. He's doing Simba's voice and like video games and computer games and lots of other stuff. He's done a lot of stuff for Kingdom Hearts also in that series. Recess, which was another fun favorite ABC show from back in the day that was good. He had quite the career from like 1995 or 1994 all the way up to the early 2000s before continuing on and doing stuff for video games. So clearly he had some skill there, and he clearly maximized that skill as a young voice actor during that time.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's great playing the annoying little brother here. It's a small role, but he's really solid. As you said, just built a whole career around it. So yeah, good on him.
Then briefly, I think maybe only one or two lines at all in this entire episode, we had the legendary George Takei, or Takai, depending on your pronunciation of it, playing Mr. Fix. So, of course, Mr. Takai very famously on the original Star Trek. He was a very big part of that. He's actually most recently did some voice work for a Star Trek podcast where he played Captain Sulu, of course, on the original Star Trek, and then he's continued to play that character many times. Very famous actor, done dozens and dozens and dozens, probably hundreds and hundreds of different projects over the years here. But yeah, it's interesting to hear him in such a very what ultimately is a felt like it was going to be like a big role, like a much bigger role, especially how prominent Mr. Fix is featured on that original promo for this show, and how much he was then later on used. We'll get to his lines next week that are probably the most famous lines he delivers as Mr. Fix, but not a ton for him to do here in this first episode, but a fun casting for somebody who has a legendary voice and obviously has done a lot of great things in the acting community.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a fun little Easter egg if you know it, and we'll certainly get a little bit more of him in part two. A very, as you said, very heavily featured line that he has in part two, in a lot of the promos. But yeah, he's very menacing as Mr. Fix just in the few lines we get. So he's got a real imposing quality to his voice, just this deep, almost there is almost like a sing-song quality to it. Like it's very fluid, but it does have this menace to it. He does a great job.
Absolutely. And then briefly, we'll talk about Michael Gross, who does not get a ton of stuff to do, obviously, before, unfortunately, his character suffers the ultimate death here at the hands of, apparently, the Jokers. We're talking about Michael Gross, of course, playing the role of Terry McGinnis's father, Warren McGinnis. So, Mr. Gross, probably most famous for his role in the Family Ties show, which was obviously, I didn't realize it ran this long, but from 1982 to 1989, Family Ties, of course, a very legendary television show for multiple reasons, launched the career of Michael J. Fox ultimately. But yeah, he played the dad on that show in Family Ties. And yeah, for this here, he's maybe another one of those fun bits of casting that Andrea Romano so likes to do here, where she casts one of the more famous sitcom dads of all time in another dad role here in playing Terry McGinnis's dad. And again, we don't get a ton of lines for Mr. McGinnis here, but I feel like Mr. Gross, I think the one that stands out to me is the scene that he ultimately has with Derek Powers, and where he's questioning what's happened to his dear friend, and when can he see him, and then when Derek Powers kind of presses him and asks him about the information, and he kind of just keeps this general even-keeled response of he doesn't know anything about the information that Derek Powers is looking for. I thought he does a good solid job there, despite not having a ton to do.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a real warm quality to his voice, and he has that. I think he plays the intrigue, as you mentioned, in the scenes with Harry, and then with our Derek Powers as well. And then, yeah, we get the big argument scene with him and Terry. It's not a lot, but he does it well, and yeah, definitely has that fatherly quality that you want in his voice. So great job.
Briefly, we also have Terry Garr, the late Terry Garr, who plays Mary McGinnis. She, of course, probably most famous for her roles in the movie Tootsie, Young Frankenstein. She's also in Mr. Mom, a Batman connection there with Michael Keaton starring in that role in Mr. Mom. But yeah, she doesn't have a ton to do either, other than she gets sort of the bookend emotional scenes for Terry's parents, as she gets to do her job to try and console both Matt and Terry a little bit here, ultimately ending in what is the most emotional scene, I would say, of the entire first episode here, where Terry breaking down, feeling this just incredible weight of guilt, and Mary's there responsible to try and console him for it.
Absolutely, yeah. I believe Miss Gar actually passed away last year, so rest in her 2 years ago, I should say. And yeah, unfortunately, no longer with us. But yeah, she does again. Not a big role for her here in this episode, but certainly a good maternal quality, because it is this heavy moment where she's trying to relay this information to Terry, and then tries to console him after the funeral. She does a really good job.
Yeah, I forgot to mention also in another small role. Again, she will continue on as a series regular as well. We have the great Lauren Tom as both Dana, as well as the one of the other virtual newswomen, and I think she voices another one of the characters as well. Lauren Tom,
she's the female Joker as well.
Yes, that's it. Yep, Kim, the female Joker. Another person who has just a laundry list of voice acting roles, and there's a reason why to this day, years and years later, she's still getting voice acting roles in her casting. She's still doing stuff here because she's unsurprisingly very good at her job.
Absolutely, she's fantastic, and yeah, only a minor role for her here as Dana. And the
but she
others,
has to pretend like she's getting tickled by a Joker. Like, I can't imagine that's
true.
very easy.
distress tickling is sounds awful, quite frankly. So the fact that she pulls it off in a believable way, and she does do a great job of, I think, that last scene at Wayne Manor when she's like, her boyfriend is telling her just had her drive him to a spooky mansion in the middle of nowhere and says, "All right, see you later.
Leave me here. Don't ask me questions about what I'm doing. Just go." Hashtag Dana deserves better.
Absolutely. But yeah, she does a great job.
All right, and then we'll get to our big three of this rather large cast here. Of course, providing the voice of Derek Powers is none other than Sherman Howard. And of course, Mr. Howard, most famous probably for his roles in Day of the Dead. He also had a role on a single episode of Seinfeld. He was also in Lethal Weapon 2. Mr. Howard does such a great job at being a smarmy CEO that you just want to see get his comeuppance. And I don't think there's any better example of that than when he's giving the fake eulogy for Warren McGinnis on the news. And like, you can just feel the insincerity of his plea and his sworn oath to hunt down the animals. I love how he calls, like, you can just feel the classness, like the class warfare in his speech by calling the Joker's gang animals. I'm gonna hunt these animals that did this down. I'm gonna use my resources to make sure these animals are brought to justice. It's like you can feel the smarmy class warfare in his voice there, and obviously we get a little bit of subtlety. I feel like it's that scene with him and Warren McGinnis where he just kind of throws in the before you go at the end, to just that ultimately seals Warren's fate here for him, to see if Warren's gonna rat on his friend or not. There's so much in that scene that's so good, but the delivery of his line and the way that they framed the camera, it feels so cinematic in the way that they did it. And that word is overused in our day and age, but it literally looked like a movie to me in the way that they cut to Warren and they cut back to a close up on Derek Powers' face. You can only get from his eyes to his mouth, and he kind of gets this little smirk on his face once Warren says that he doesn't know what, anything about the information, the missing files. He just gets this little smirk. And he says, "Of course you don't." And then he, you know, lets Warren leave, and then we get the cut to Mr. Fix. But he's so good in this role. It makes me so sad that we only got one season of Sherman Howard ultimately as Blight, as we know, slash Derek Powers. But boy, I think he nailed this role.
Yeah, I mean, famously, for DCU fans, people may remember he almost was Lex Luthor before that role ended up going to Clancy Brown,
Right.
who, of course, did it magnificently. So, and I believe Sherman Howard, if I'm not mistaken, played Lex Luthor on the Superboy TV series as well. So, uh, there's an evil businessman just lurking inside this gentleman, just waiting to get out. And finally, we found the correct vehicle for him with this Derek Powers, because yes, it is this very it's very understated. He's not the cackling maniacal and he doesn't really even have like the sort of baritone voice that Clancy Brown has with Lex. It's all just this underlying slime and sort of arrogance to him, and the way he carries himself is there, and this sort of this psychotic side, which we'll explore, which we explore in the rest of the first season of the show. It's there, but even in these quieter moments, like you said, in the scene in the boardroom with Warren, or when he's feigning concern and vowing to catch these crooks on the news or whatever, like it's just there's this insincerity to him, and this sort of edge and this slimy texture to everything he says that just really makes your skin crawl in a good way. What a great job he did as this character. Yes, as you said, his only crime is, and it's not his crime, it's the crime of whatever mandate made it that we never got more Blight after the first season. But he's fantastic here.
Absolutely. And of course, before we move on to this episode's Batman, we will talk about the former Batman that technically is still Batman for at least part of this episode, and as we learn later on, is still Batman in his own head. That, of course, is the late great Kevin Conroy playing Bruce Wayne, and for a period of time here at the beginning, he plays Batman. Boy, if you want a clinic of how incredible Kevin Conroy was at playing Batman, I think just the idea that this character has this change, and we shift 50 years. Imagine being told, okay, you're playing the same character, but he's 80. He's in his 80s now. Like, but obviously Kevin Conroy wasn't 80 years old. So how do you communicate that other than the visual and the way that, the visual and what's showing up on the screen? How does this not just sound like the same Bruce Wayne that we've seen, in his 30s or his 20s, that we've seen in Batman the Animated Series and in the new Batman Adventures? How do you differentiate that? And I think Kevin Conroy, the gravel, and I think he slows his speech down just slightly in his delivery, but there's just something about it that just shows, like, yes, this is the same character that obviously that you've been watching all these years, but he is older, and somehow Kevin was able to age his voice in a way, just through, I think, the delivery and the way that he says some of his lines. When he says, "Get off my property," like I was like, you know what? This would be he is like Clint Eastwood in this, like, get off my lawn. Like, he's doing the thing, and he's not anywhere near Clint Eastwood's age. Like, he's 30 years younger probably than, or 40 years younger than Clint Eastwood, and when he's giving this line here, just so good. And when he bashes Terry over the back of the head after he's discovered the Bat Cave, and he tells him to get out, man, it's so good. And it's different than that opening line that we get from him, or the end of the opening scene where he says "never again," which again is one of the defining lines, I feel like, for this show, because they just played it in those promos over and over and over again, because that's how they introduced, this was Bruce, he stopped being Batman, now we have a new Batman, and that line of "never again" played over and over and over in those promos. So yeah, unsurprisingly, Have we talked about how great Kevin Conroy is today?
Well, yeah, it's never enough, even as we've done it on almost literally every episode we've ever done. But yeah, he's fantastic here. Finding, I know there's some interviews and with Kevin over the years that he did before he passed, sort of talking specifically about how he found the older Bruce Wayne voice. It's funny, I don't know if we mentioned this in visuals. There was almost an even older and more decrepit looking Bruce Wayne design, and I always wonder what the voice would have been if it would have been even more craggly and visceral, if we had gone with that voice. Maybe we got a taste of that in epilogue, because that's basically the design that he has in those some of those sequences. But regardless, the still very older Bruce Wayne, and I think that's kind of fun because we get like 60-year-old Bruce at the start, where it's starting, but it's still mostly the TNBA Batman, and then you get the really gravelly old man Bruce when we cut to him in the future. So yeah, unsurprisingly, a great job by Mr. Conroy, as always.
That's right. And then rounding out our voice cast for this week, Liam. So in his very first role in the DCAU, we have a young man by the name of Will Friedle, who is voicing our Terry McGinnis, not quite Batman just yet, but will eventually turn into Batman. Terry McGinnis, voiced by Will Friedle, of course, most famous for his role prior to this, and I actually nowadays probably most famous for his role in Boy Meets World. I think he actually does a podcast or frequently appears on. There's a pretty popular Boy Meets World podcast that shows up on. He's done a lot of voice acting, obviously. After that, he still continues to do voice acting today, but. Yeah, this is his first go round as the future Dark Knight here, and I will say I think it's a home run. Another one, unshockingly, maybe that our voice casting director and the directors of the show settled on the perfect voice. He's got the youthful energy in this, as well as a little bit of that rebellious nature. We hear that come out in the way, again, that in that emotional scene where he's yelling at his dad, but he also has a softness to him. We see that when he's breaking down in front of his mom and expressing this great deep regret in how he talked to his dad before he died. And he's challenging and being rebellious and screaming at Bruce almost in the same way that he screamed at his own dad earlier on in the episode. So we see him challenging Bruce. We see him kind of acting, doing self-narration after Bruce falls asleep. He's narrating the scene, talks about his dad's going to ground him for life. We see him cracking wise with Ace and some of the other guys. He's taunting his own bully and Nelson Nash. There's a lot of stuff here in this first 22 minutes here to kind of introduce you to this character and let you know, as you said, especially with that opening sequence with him and the Joker that attacks the lady on the vertical subway. You reveal a lot about who this character is, and I think a lot of it comes through that voice performance from Mr. Friedle.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for this to be, as he now points out, his first ever voice acting gig is Batman Beyond, which is crazy. Because as you mentioned, he's gone on to do so much more, both in superheroes and other animation and video games and all that stuff. But it all starts here, and yeah, I think he really nailed it with, like, it's an energy thing. Like you get in that first scene with Terry on the subway, you really immediately get a feel for who he is. And again, that sort of take no ish type of attitude that he has. He's a little bit arrogant. He's a little bit strong, hot headed because he's a teenager. And kind of is ready to fight the whole world, it feels like. He has a lot of pent up anger and rage that's just kind of waiting to get out of him and waiting to be focused perhaps, and you hear that in Mr. Friedle's voice. And yeah, he has to kind of run the gamut of emotion in this episode, from anger and being sort of quippy and charming to also having that scene where he breaks down with his mom at the end. He's got a lot to do right off the bat as well. They don't ease you in at all, and I guess if you're number one on the call sheet, so to speak, you don't get eased in. You got to bring it right away. And yeah, he nails it, perhaps unsurprisingly, given how often we've sung his praises over the years for his acting work. But yeah, great first step here as Terry, and excited to see part 2 when we actually get to hear, because we haven't even got to talk about his. I mean, we have, because we've done the show, but we will get to it when we come back for part 2 in a couple weeks. Here we'll get to discuss his Batman voice, as well as, following in the tradition of Kevin Conroy, he also adjusts his voice when he's in the suit. So we'll have even more to talk about then.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just for clarification here, our scores for both parts for voice acting, I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. I don't see that number changing, but unless something crazy happens next week. And you had given voice acting not quite as strong, but still very strong, an 8 out of 10. So we had a couple of high scores here for this episode. So our final scores were 32 and 31 respectively. I think, unless something catastrophic happens next week, I dare think I'll probably be disagreeing with myself, and probably would have ranked this a little bit higher, but I guess we shall see.
Absolutely, Cal. So we will be waiting. Are we doing part 2 next week, or are we doing 2 Zetas and then the week after?
Let's make people come back in 2 weeks.
Okay, that's smart. I think 2 Zetas in a row might just crush us.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely, Cal. Can't wait to talk about that and see if we agree with those final scores when we come back and talk about part 2. That'll be in 2 weeks, as we will get to what we're reviewing next week. It's a future month, so you should already know if you're a longtime listener. But we'll preview it in just a moment here. But as we wrap up this deep dive of Rebirth Part 1, we want to thank everybody for listening, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our YouTube channel, or any of those other sites or podcast apps. We appreciate it. If your podcast platform of choice lets you subscribe, rate, give us 5 stars, write a review on Apple Podcasts. If you do, we'll even send you a little gift. Also, please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Click like, click share, all those things helps us get bumped up in the all important search algorithms, as does leaving a comment if you're listening on Spotify and rating us 5 stars there. We appreciate you. That's a great free way to support the podcast. Another great free way to support us is to make sure you're following us on the socials. Most of our stuff is going to be found on Instagram and Twitter/X. But you can also find us hanging around occasionally on sites like Threads and Blue Sky as well. And we appreciate you supporting us in those free ways. If you'd like to actually put a little bit of coinage in the piggy bank, if you have a few dollars to spare, there's a couple ways to do that, and there are links in the show notes. One of which, of course, is our store, where you can head there and get yourself a shirt or a mug or a hat or something, and we get a little cut of that. Or, Cal, we also have, as mentioned, buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, where if you're a monthly subscriber, one of the perks you get at certain levels is the ability to ask a question, and that we will answer here on the show. And if I'm not mistaken, we have one from our buddy Zach this week.
We do. Yes, Zach was very excited that we were doing a Rebirth review, and he does have a question for both parts. So Zach will get to part 2 in 2 weeks. We'll have your question for that. For this week, though, he says, Nightwing's costume being in the Batcave display case, what are your thoughts? We don't find out till Return of the Joker that Dick Grayson is still alive. But does his costume being in the Batcave mean he has retired? Has he started using a different costume? Great question, Zach. Famously, I believe it was Bruce Timm who said, I don't care what happened to Dick Grayson. But I will be much kinder than Bruce Timm is in that case. I think at this point, if we're looking at ultimately how many years have passed here, 50 years have passed. And if we're looking at what Dick's age was, probably around 22 if he graduated college in the normal, typical 4-year institution, because we know he graduated college in Old Wounds, or before Old Wounds, that ultimately led to him leaving the Robin mantle and becoming Nightwing, right? So 50 years from that, he's in his 70s. So my guess is he is well retired. He's probably been retired for quite some time. We do know, of course, that he went to Bloodhaven because he does make a cameo in the Justice League Unlimited episode that we covered a few months ago, where he's hanging out there with his flowing mullet in Bloodhaven. We also know that he's Nightwing for some time because we see him again in Batman and Harley Quinn as Nightwing there. So we know that he's there. We know that he stays as Nightwing for some time. Whether or not he got a new costume or if he just gifted Bruce the costume when he was done, or Bruce repossessed it. We do also know in Return of the Joker that that Bruce forbid anybody from helping him once what happens to Tim happens to Tim. Whether or not I think Barbara says Nightwing had moved on to a different city though before then, so I guess he would not have been part of that forbidding. So I guess maybe just because Bruce was collecting all of the things, maybe he asked Nightwing for it. Maybe they made up.
I like that. Yeah, I'll just to be different, I'll just say Bruce stole it. One of his last nights as Batman. Yeah, I guess in my head, when we see that flashback at the beginning and he's on his final night, he's already got the other 4 suits in the case. Well, he does, because we see him when he puts it back. So sometime right before Bruce retired, he jetted over to, maybe he used the Justice League teleporter to teleport into Nightwing's apartment and stole his suit. That's gonna be
one last act.
One
last middle finger to Dick Grayson.
Yes. That, and I'm assuming he also cut off his mullet, because that haircut he has in Batman and Harley Quinn is a travesty. I do like the idea of a Bruce Dick prank war unfolding. I think that's a fun idea.
That's fun canon. But that's fun head canon. Yep.
But I'll say Bruce took it without asking, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, as we always talk about, we wish we could have seen Dick Grayson in some form in this series, and maybe someday that question will be answered. I know there's some tie-in Batman Beyond comics that go in that route, though they are not considered DCAU canon. So we'll have to leave it up to our imaginations. But thank you very much, Zach, for your question there. Can't wait to talk about Rebirth Part 2 in 2 weeks, Cal. But as we keep alluding to, when we head to the future, and unfortunately for the last couple of years, that has no longer just meant Batman Beyond, which means before we get to Rebirth Part 2, next week, we're going to be talking about another Your Type of Show puke face. It's a double feature of the Zeta Project. And mercifully, we are counting down. We only have, I believe, a total of 5 episodes to go, but we have 2 more episodes of the Zeta Project to talk about next week.
That means after this month, we will only have 1 episode left, God willing.
Wow.
But next week, we will be covering the double feature of On the Wire and Cabin Pressure. Will they be good episodes? Hard to tell, because sometimes the names are deceiving. We won't know. I'm going to go with probably not. But we'll find out together on next week's episode. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Always a roller coaster when we get into the Zetas. So hopefully folks will come back next week. Have some fun. We get a lot of our aggression out in those Zeta reviews, so they're usually, I think, quite a bit of fun to record and hopefully fun to listen to. So until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you next week, hopefully, on another episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios. Please come back and listen to the episode, please. Please don't leave us.